give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. My name is Brennan Klein. What's your name, person who's sitting many hundreds of miles away from me?
My name is Tim Brayton.
Hi, Tim.
Hi, Brennan.
This is our second episode of December. This is also our kind of second
Is
part.
Is it our second episode?
If you step into the time portal with me, yes, and we can pretend that the first episode was actually in November as it was meant to be.
Okay.
This is our second. You know what? This is our second December episode. Is that a better way of phrasing it?
That is a better way of phrasing it.
December themed. But yes, we are. I'm going to use the word celebrating the 25th anniversary of Scream, which did come out I think the day after Christmas in 1996.
December 20th. I looked.
Oh,
it up.
20th. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, its premiere was on my birthday, no less.
Happy
and then it
birthday,
opened on the
Tim!
28th. Oh, thank you. It's it is what it is.
It certainly is. But yeah, so we have been talking about doing this episode from the very beginning because Tim and I have very extreme opposite opinions on this film.
That is accurate. I guess we can't say extreme
Yeah.
because that would imply that this is like my all-time least favorite film, which it is certainly not. But we'll get to that point, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will. I think I will open with where I came to Scream and how it fits into my life. So you can proceed with crushing all of my dreams after that. So basically, the reason I like horror is Scream. Okay, sorry, I thought you were frozen for 1 second, but you're just.
Oh no,
you're
no,
just,
I'm sitting and listening very patiently to your story.
Yeah, with grim determination.
It is hard not to feel
No.
grim determination when the concept of Scream comes into my face.
It is the sense of Scream was my sourdough starter. Because it was 2011, I was watching Source Code, and the trailer before Source Code was for Scream 4, and I was like, oh, that looks interesting. There's, a creepy guy on a phone, and I was like, let's figure out what's going on with this. So I used my Netflix mail-in DVD service to...
Don't make fun of Netflix mail and DVDs. I still have Netflix mail and DVDs in my house.
Oh, no, I still use those periodically when I feel like it, and have money.
Yes.
But it really does feel like a throwback at this point.
No, it for sure is. It's a coelacanth.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I used that to watch the first 3 Scream films, and eventually I didn't get to see Scream 4 in theaters, but I saw that I caught up with it once it came out on DVD. But then watching those movies, I just had such a good time that I then decided to watch like all the movies that were then referenced in Scream. So like that summer, it was just me and my long-suffering high school boyfriend watching all the Friday the 13th and the Elm Streets and the Halloweens and, Blair Witch Project and no, it said Halloween. The John Carpenter's The Thing, and just kind of like really diving into horror. And that was kind of the foundational summer of the thing that I do now. Like this podcast would not exist if I hadn't seen the trailer for Scream 4 in 2011.
All right. That's a lot to put, not just on the Scream franchise, but specifically on Scream 4, which God bless Scream 4.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Scream 4 is a 7 out of 10 movie. It's fun.
I think Scream 4 is absolutely not the worst film in the Scream franchise.
Oh, without a doubt. But yeah, and I guess I should mention you are talking to some... Like, I don't think... Look, I am not the kind of fan that like gets really upset when people don't like the things that he likes. I'm not incredibly defensive about it, although I am prepared. I have my my musket with me. I have my like Union patch here. I am ready to go to battle, but I'm willing to cede some ground because I'm not unreasonable.
And that's nice because I am very unreasonable.
Exactly.
No, it's good. I don't want to be in a position where like shit over something that is important to your development, and so I will be polite in how I talk about the fact that there's not one single element of Scream that I enjoy watching.
That'll be interesting to break down. But just to complete that, look, things that are formative aren't always good. I was just telling you off mic about how Rent was an extremely important movie to me when I was in high school, and that is no longer particularly the case. Scream is a movie that I have a deep abiding love for, and that I do genuinely think is good in a lot of ways, but also am fully capable of acknowledging things that aren't perfect about it. Like, the thing that I like doesn't have to be perfect, and that's not part of my personality. But yes, you are talking to someone who does have a ghost face tattoo, so that's something.
Okay.
That's something that's going on.
I feel like I knew that fact. I feel like that had come up before.
It's here.
I kind of recall.
I showed it to the trivia folks after I got it.
That's right. That's right.
But yes. So, did you see Scream in theaters?
I sure did not. I first saw Scream in 2009. So I did see it before you did, but I was also not in high school. I was a 27-year-old at that point. I've talked about this, but I think it's germane, so I'll talk about it again. I came to horror somewhat late. I didn't dislike it, certainly, and I enjoyed finding things that I thought were creepy and spooky and scary. But it's not like I systematically watched horror as an adolescent, which I think is when most people do, is it sort of becomes a high school thing. What I did do in high school and beyond, I systematically watched bad movies. And I actually got to horror through that because a lot of the movies that are sort of canonically like just so incredibly awful are horror adjacent in some capacity. And it was really in 2007 when I first sat down to watch the Friday the 13th franchise start to finish, in the spirit of these are movies that are like pretty trashy but pretty important. That was probably the first time that I really found myself like in the headspace of a horror fan per se. Like, I mean, by this point, there's already plenty of horror films that I absolutely fucking love and would like go to bat for, including Halloween I'd seen by that point. But I wouldn't say that I liked slashers until Friday the 13th happens. And again, by this point, you know, I'm into Italian horror already. I think I first saw Suspiria in 2005. But I mean, for me, Suspiria was and is still formal. It's like I watch it because it's color and it's sound and it's not. I like the gore effects, but it's not to me. It doesn't trigger the same part of my brain that that a slasher movie does. So I'm a horror fan starting in sort of the mid 2000s, and I had never seen Scream at the time just because again, in 1996, I was just not someone who watched that kind of movie. I think I would have been 15 years old. Yeah, it premiered on my 15th birthday. So not old enough to see it by myself. No one in my life would have taken me to see it because no one in my life liked that kind of movie either. So it wasn't until 2009 that I saw it for the first time as part of my like ongoing and publicly expressed, you know, this is part of the Summer of Blood, my project of trying to watch all of the important horror franchises. So I had by that point already cleared out Friday the 13th, Nightmare, Halloween,
Texas Chainsaw.
And I think even in that specific summer that I did this, I think the Scream films followed the Sleepaway Camp films, if I recall correctly.
That sounds familiar. That was the summer where it was like a bunch of tinier things, so it's hard to remember exactly.
It was shorter franchises, yeah. But I think I tried to watch them more or less in the order that the franchises themselves started. Also, I did watch it, you know, directly tied up with the I Know What You Did Last Summer movies.
Oh, well, see, that's a way to make Scream extremely shine in comparison.
Sure does. Sure does. And that's what I will say. All four of the Screams are better than all three of the I Know What You Dids. So
yes, I mean that's not even fair.
Just facts.
Yeah,
that's just facts.
That's like saying that Scream is better than staring at a rock for 2 hours. But it's true, but it's not particularly
Except
kind.
the rock is also like got a piece of dog shit on it. So it's not even like a good rock.
Yeah, it's like it's a rock that is both boring and painful.
Yes. No. So hooray. This is not Kevin Williamson's worst script. But no, so I do come to it, you know, at the age of whatever that would have been 27. Already sort of having an affinity for these grungy, terrible things that are called slasher films. Like in 2007 and onward, something about the Friday the 13th the movies, all of which are bad. Maybe not all of which. I think you could, on aesthetic grounds, probably defend 2 and maybe 4. But let's just say all of the Friday the 13th movies are bad. But even as I was watching them and realizing they were bad, something about them just kind of like dug in.
There's something alchemical about the Friday the 13th movies.
There really is. So that's kind of my relationship at this point, or at this point being 2009, to the slasher movies, is that like I both dislike them, but also they're inside of me in a way. Like there's just a part of me that just can't get enough of them. And I think in a sense that is exactly the disposition you want to have walking into Scream. And yet just didn't get there for me. But we'll talk about the didn't get there versus got there.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, let's dive into the plot a little bit. Well, I have a question. Did you rewatch Scream to prep for this podcast?
I sure did.
Okay, well, great. Thank you so much for doing that.
I would not have had the capacity to talk about it with 12-year-old memories.
Oh, that's a great. So you've only seen it the once.
This is the second time I've ever seen Scream. Was the night before this recording.
This is fascinating to me. Okay, just imagining what your life must be like. Yeah, because for me,
whereas I have seen Friday the 13th, the final chapter, not fewer than 6 times. So,
I mean, me neither.
There's that.
But yeah, I mean that is also a great movie. But yeah, Scream. I mean, I'm not an obsessive rewatcher, but I'd say I've probably seen Scream a dozen times in my life, and I most recently watched it for its 25th anniversary Fathom event screening in October. So it was just too fresh for me to fully rewatch.
Sure.
Just like with when our first episode, when we did the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I did rewatch that, and it was the most useless thing I've ever done. This would have been that situation, because I can recall any scene of Scream that I need to at any point, even without that having seen it 2 months ago.
Sure.
So I'm prepared. But if I do miss any details in the plot synopsis that you want to throw in there, please feel free to do so.
I cannot imagine that is likely to be the case, but we will. If you don't say something that I will need you to have said in order for me to talk about what I want to talk about, I'll stop you.
Yeah, no worries. And because it's Scream and because it is 25 years ago, I'm just going to go ahead and pull off the spoiler Band-Aid now. We're just going to be talking about it.
Because also, in a sense, you can't talk about it without talking about how it ends, because that's one of its things.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, so for sure, if you have not seen Scream, I highly recommend that you do. And I think Tim would reluctantly agree that it's probably something you should have seen, right?
Oh, it's important. I mean, there are lots of movies. I sort of make my life's work out of, well, you need to see this movie, and it doesn't matter if you like it or not, because you need to have seen it. And this is how I have watched many films.
Exactly. Sometimes you just got to eat your vegetables.
I mean, I'm even going to say you need to see at least Screams 2 and 3, and I think Scream 3 is a fucking dog, but it's still a film you need to have seen.
Yeah, and it is a fucking dog with Parker Posey in it, so that does help a little bit.
That also helps.
It is like that is the dog turd, but it has like a little daisy sticking out of the top of it.
This metaphor's got legs. I think we can go places with this.
Thank you. Oh god, a little turd with legs. We're making our own horror movie out of this. Anyway, so Scream. It is Scream. It is the movie that kind of began the Kevin Williamson like soapy CW teen slasher movie, which is not necessarily a proud achievement.
I will say my feelings about this achievement is that when you said it began the Kevin Williamson ... I almost wanted to just jump right in and say Reign of Terror. So.
To be fair to you being terrorized, the Kevin Williamson era really was only like 3 years. Like it really didn't extend past into the millennium in any sort of material way.
It sure did not, but it not only included this franchise and the just filth and vulgarity of the I Know What You Did Last Summer's, it also included Dawson's Creek.
That's true. But also The Faculty. Do you like The Faculty?
Oh, I don't dislike The Faculty. I forgot that was him. Wasn't he also killing / teaching Mrs. Tingle? Am I remembering
Yes,
that
and that
correct?
was his directorial debut.
Yes. Yes.
That movie is a movie that exists.
That is a movie that feels like there's a much better version of it that didn't get made somehow, and I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah. But anyway, so Scream. There is a killer stalking the small Northern California town of Woodsboro, as played by Santa Rosa and Healdsburg up in the wine country. Basically, this killer is wearing this kind of cloak and mask that many people say mimics Edvard Munch's The Scream, and they're not wrong, but it's just a spooky, screamy mask. You know it. You've seen it.
Yeah, it feels to me like one of those things where you objectively have to say that it is a reference to the Scream painting, but at the same time, it feels like it's not a design that... The design was out there in the world to be made into a mask. I don't think that that's like an homage, per se.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't feel right to say that it's an homage to me. But anyway, so smash cut. Drew Barrymore is there. Basically, Drew Barrymore is the Janet Leigh of this film. She is menaced by a killer over the phone who tortures her with various horror trivia related questions, which, if you gotta go, that's the way I would choose to.
Oh, for real.
But so basically, she gets murdered early on. The actual protagonist is Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell. She is a very sad teenager. And it is approaching the 1-year anniversary of her mother's rape and murder, for which she has pinned the blame on Liev Schreiber in 2 seconds of the film as Cotton Weary, who is now in prison. And yet there is a killer stalking the teenagers of Woodsboro and also the principal because they needed to boost the body count in the middle of the movie.
They sure did.
Basically... I mean, there's a lot of business with characters that I could bring up now, or we could just bring them up as we want to talk about them. But essentially, she and her friends are being menaced by a killer. Courtney Cox plays intrepid reporter Gail Weathers, who is just like a full trashy tabloid journalist. And she is both manipulating and a little bit falling in love with David Arquette's character of Deputy Dewey Riley. And they are also kind of another... like set of people on the tack of maybe on the route to figuring out who this killer is, because it is a whodunit in a way that a lot of slashers at this point hadn't been.
Yeah, no, like the slasher film begins as a murder mystery genre, but I think that element of it had pretty much been burned off by God. 83.
Yeah.
84.
Well, as Elm Street rose and movies became, more supernatural, more like paranormal, they definitely eschewed the idea like that there is just a person running around in boots and a mask and stabbing people.
Yeah, no, I mean 84 is clearly the watershed year when the slasher switches over from human killers to paranormal killers, but I feel the shift away from murder mysteries actually happened earlier. Like a film like the first Friday the 13th or Prom Night are murder mysteries in a way that even by 81, I mean, Friday the 13th Part 2 is not a murder mystery.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And, The Burning is not a murder mystery. Like,
Right.
a lot of the classic examples, that did drop really quickly. Like,
Yeah, so maybe it's really literally just a 1980 phenomena. The slasher film is a murder mystery.
I mean, it definitely... The ones that have cops as the protagonist tend to be murder mysteries because they're like, or they're more like, procedurals.
Sure.
So it would kind of stick around occasionally, but yeah, like as a major movement of the slasher, you're right. It was very early on.
And yeah, and certainly it occurs to me one of the films that I do want to talk about at some point in connection with Scream, which is April Fool's Day. That's a murder mystery. And that's as late as 86. So
yeah, like it didn't go away because the slasher was such a robust genre that everything exists simultaneously. It really came unstuck in time like Billy Pilgrim. But the overall movements, especially by the mid 90s when the slasher was already long on its like past its dying breath, when we were still living through Leprechaun sequels and The Dentist and things like that. It was just in that post Freddy mode of quippy killers where you're seeing them in full light from frame one. So this at least resurrected the idea that a slasher could be a whodunit, which hadn't been around for a while.
For a really long time.
Yeah. And the answer to the whodunit is that it's who's done it. It's two killers. The killers in this case are Skeet Ulrich playing Billy Loomis, which is Sydney's boyfriend, and Matthew Lillard as Stu, who is Billy's stooge and just kind of overall goofy personage about town.
That is a very astute summary of Stu's characterization, I would say. And there is one element of the plot summary that you did skip over, and you said not too much character stuff, and I think we can certainly get back to the character stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it matters at a fairly fundamental level. We have these multiple groups of protagonists. We have, sort of Sydney and whomever is or is not allied with her at any given time. We have Gail and Dewey. Gail wrote the tell-all book, or not tell-all book, but like the book basically accusing Sydney of being a manipulative liar who got an innocent man in prison. And that's kind of a tension that is, I think, thrumming through most of the film, in that it does raise this question: is Sydney just wrong and consumed with guilt?
Yes, that too. Because even before, I mean, this movie is post her mother's murder, but even before like the worst things in her life are going to happen to her, Sydney is a very mopey 90s teen depressed character, as she will be throughout the rest of the franchise as well. That is kind of her primary mode of being. But yes, that is one of the kind of critical character dynamics. And also might as well throw in a mention of Randy, who is the Jamie Kennedy character who, as an obnoxious teen who likes horror movies, if you're watching it, you're like, that's me. And then you're watching it as an adult and you're like, oh no, that was me.
No, I feel like yeah, we have to talk about Randy, because Randy is the authorial voice. Randy is Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson sort of like leaning over our shoulder and telling us what we should be thinking.
He really is. Oh yeah, I mean, I guess I didn't mention what is one of the fundamental aspects of this movie, even though it's we'll get to it.
It's like being a fish and talking about water. Like, of course, that's part of Scream. Like, how could you even bring it up without it just being like, well, duh.
Yeah, the ultimate premise is that these are characters who are more or less aware that they are in a slasher movie. Right. And are aware that there are certain rules that govern how they're supposed to behave, as evinced by Randy during his climactic speech at the party at Stu's house that forms like a substantial chunk of the movie, like for sure Act 3, like eating into Act 2.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's just good old fashioned slasher movie structure, where you get all of your expendable meat into one space and then just have the killer sort of chip away at them from the edges.
Yeah, exactly. And it's more or less a cabin in the woods. It is a very isolated kind of farmhouse in California wine country, so there is no one around. But yes, okay, where to begin? In an effort to find the ground that I was going to cede to you during this conversation, I kind of did a pro and con column of like things that are good and things that are bad about this movie, or things that I perceive as such.
Okay, because I was actually, in order to cede ground to you, I had some things that I genuinely admire about the film and unabashedly like and think work, and was going to be happy to talk about some of those.
Yeah, let's open with yours, and then like debate style, and then I'll talk about some of my negatives, and then we can crash into each other.
Well, I think we can start with one of my positives in a very convenient and organic way, because it's right where the movie starts. The sequence with Drew Barrymore is good. It's just flat out good. You can't like slasher movies and think that material doesn't work. Yeah,
it is such a good extended opening sequence. It is so, like, I mean, I hesitate to use the word funny, but it's tongue in cheek in a way that isn't completely in your face.
Right.
Like it's fun. Like it is fun, but it is also scary, and it is also like a good tense chase sequence around a single location.
It's multiple. It's as you say. It's a good tense sequence, and I also like about it that it's doing the thing the movie does, but it's not telegraphing it, and it's not putting it in air quotes. It's not like there's a moment where Casey, the Drew Barrymore character, like sort of yells into the phone, "Why are you treating me like the protagonist?" And when a stranger calls, right? Like it's not.
Yeah.
It's not flagging the thing that it's doing, and it has the thing where the killer is like asking movie trivia questions of her, but it doesn't feel like we're in meta movie yet as she's doing this. And it's a well paced scene. It's very well cut, like just fucking beautifully cut, and I have no complaints. I think the use of the Jiffy Pop as a kind of like
Yes.
ticking time bomb element is really clever. I think Barrymore's performance is the best in the film. I think it has a very striking final tableau when we see her body strung up from a tree. Whole thing.
Yeah, and then of course there's the moment where her throat has been ravaged and she's trying to call out to her mom as her mom is entering the door, and like she's off to the side trying to scream for help and can't. Like that is a visceral, like nightmarish moment of horror.
Agreed. It's a common trick, but it always works on me when a movie demonstrates that a human body is much harder to kill than most movies present. Like she gets stabbed in the heart and she gets stabbed in the throat and she's still not dead.
Mm-hmm.
That play always works on me. The like actually you will linger horribly and you won't be able to do anything about it sort of extended death.
Yeah. And then it also has the other side of it when the mother is hearing her daughter die on the other side of the phone, and unaware of where she is or what's going on or what to do about it and being completely unable to help. Like it is a very intense ending to that scene. And you're right, and the meta elements of the fun part leading into it are much more sly and subtle. It's the place where the film best evokes the tagline of the movie of like, you know, someone's taken their love of horror movies one step too far. Because it's about people who like horror movies, like kind of creating one, but without the sense of like, we're a movie, ha ha ha. But there's another subtle thing that Wes Craven does that I really like in this scene, which is that she is about to watch a VHS, and so her TV is on, and it's displaying that blue kind of like blank, like before anything has started playing screen that you would get in the 90s. And that is kind of the dominant color of the opening part of that scene, which is also indicating to you like a movie is starting for you, and I think that's in one of the more subtle elements of the movie.
I like that. No, I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but yeah, that's very good. I have to throw a question your way because I was thinking about this as I was watching the scene last night. Would you have gotten the Friday the 13th question?
Oh, see, that's the thing. Under pressure, I might have fucked up.
I feel like the way that the conversation had flowed would give me the context of we're talking about franchises.
Oh, yeah.
And I would have just kind of blazed right in. I don't think I would have even paused to think about he's talking about a specific movie.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, because for me, when that question is asked, a little flag raises in my brain because of Scream.
Okay.
Because that is like one of the iconic trivia tidbits from Scream that people will still repeat, where it's like, it's not actually Jason who's the killer in the first one. So in the post-Scream world, like that is something that a question that I'm aware of needs to be pinged. But in that moment, if I was Casey Becker, I probably would have also gotten it wrong.
Same. Now, if you'd said, who is the killer in Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, then we're talking.
Exactly. Roy, my favorite character.
Yep. Roy the paramedic.
Oh my God.
Everyone's favorite Roy.
Mm-hmm. Such a great film.
It's the best film.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best film.
The only good movie. Anyway, so do you have other good things? Should I throw out like one of my negatives and then we can kind of volley?
I don't know if I'm going to have how many negative things do you have?
I think substantially only like 2.
Okay, then yeah, we can do a volley
Yeah.
because I only have 2 good things.
Okay, great. because we did kind of talk about the inception of the meta element of this movie, and I would say ultimately, even though I find it fun and engaging, I don't think the meta element really plays into the story particularly well. It feels like a superficial kind of gloss over the film rather than an integral part of the narrative it's choosing to tell to me. Because ultimately, I think Scream really succeeds as a whodunit and just as a fun version of like the glossy slashers that we were going to be getting in the 90s. But I don't think by the end of the movie you're like, oh, well, this was really informed by the fact that they've seen a lot of horror movies. Like the part where Randy is insisting, like, if they'd seen Prom Night, they'd understand what's going on. And it's like, actually, no, Prom Night in no way informs any of the goings on of Scream. That's actually a really stupid thing for him to say. It doesn't make any sense. And also, I wish they had kept up the movie trivia element longer, because the opening scene is the only place where that actually happens.
Agreed. I had never thought about that part, and I think you're exactly right. I think that being an ongoing gimmick would actually have been super fucking cool, and it would have worked a lot. And I completely agree with you with the rest. I think the meta-ness, the commentary on the tropes of the slasher movie, I think is very much a superficial thing. And particularly, you bring up the prom night moment. There are moments where I think the film makes it work, and we can talk about that. Actually just occurred to me I do have 3, not 2, good things.
I think I know exactly the moment that you're going to be talking about.
You know exactly the moment that I'm going to be talking about. I think that is, to me, the primary problem with Scream, is that it has this meta thing going on. I don't think the meta thing does anything. I think the meta thing, Williamson and Craven, I think, believe that it's funnier and smarter than I think it is. And for you, this is just a thing that doesn't work about the movie. For me, this would be like going to have a romantic dinner in like a reclaimed farmhouse. And you're sitting there and the food is brought out to your table and it's really good food. And then a cow walks by and just takes a giant fucking shit right at the table and then walks away. And like the food was still good. It was still prepared well. I could still be like, this steak has been done to perfection. Ooh, this broccoli has just such a nice crisp on it. But there's still a 4-foot pile of cow shit 3 feet away from me.
Oh my God.
And that's going to like, this is the metaphor I'm running for this episode. We just need to be ready for that.
Yeah.
And that to me, it's like, even though it's an extractable part of the experience, it's just, there's too much of it. And I just can't be like, I can't get over it.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, I think fundamentally how we're responding to this movie just is mostly temperamental.
Oh yeah.
But just to put a little bouquet of daisies in the cow pat, there are elements, because, I mean, look, we've all read your review of Scream from 2009. I think that a thing that you have expressed in the past that you disliked about it is the sense of them saying like, oh, this is a stupid thing, like a stupid type of movie, but we're going to be completely indulgent and make this stupid type of movie. I don't fully agree that they're insulting the slasher genre in such a way, except for a scene that I do think works, where she's like, oh, horror movies are so dumb. The girl's always running up the stairs instead of going out the front door. But they present a scenario in which she is unable to go out the front door and kind of force her to relive the thing she just made fun of. And I think that that's a kind of cruel irony rather than a, look, we're being stupid. But I do think that the characters don't really use their knowledge of horror to any meaningful extent to actually solve the problem of the movie.
I would agree with that. And wouldn't be able to, given that this film presents, as we said, 2 killers, which is not part of the formula. So they would be, but that's not even something the film like makes hay out of. It's not like it sort of gives the characters knowledge that turns out to be, it's not like it makes them too smart about the wrong things. It just sort of isn't there.
Yeah, it's not an important element of the movie as much as they want it to be.
But I did want to talk about something else that I like about the movie, and since we both know that I'm going to talk about it, I'll go for the scene where Jamie Kennedy is watching Halloween talking to the movie, which I don't get. Like, I know that's a thing, like people, like that's a commonplace when people are watching a movie. I've never said to a character in a movie, oh no, don't go in that room. Cause like, well, the character in the movie was on set, 18 years ago. They're not going to hear me. I'm just going to sit and passively receive the visual information being given. But we'll spot it that he's doing that. He's doing this whilst the killer is behind him and a cop is watching him on CCTV saying the same
Or
things to him.
the camera guy, Gale Weathers camera guy.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Gale Weathers camera guy. But yeah, so that moment is good. It's a good moment.
Yes, and that you're right, because that is the meta thing of like this person is watching a movie of this person watching a movie, and there's that layered effect.
Yeah. It's very cool. It's the one point where the fact that Randy is a big movie buff actually feels like it does something for tension rather than just provides a bunch of Easter eggs and gags.
Yeah, because especially the rules that he lays out don't come to fruition in any sort of satisfying way. He's just like, you can't have sex, and then Sydney has sex, and then that's not really anything. Like they pay homage, they like give lip service to, he's like, you had sex, you gotta die, but it's just like it's not really anything. But the other my other like big negative is there are some goofy ass moments in the second act when they're kind of between major kills. This is the area where they had to put in the death of Henry Winkler's principal Himbry because there was just a lull in the middle. But there are two scenes where Ghostface is just galumphing around in the daylight. There's one where Sydney and her friend Tatum, played by Rose McGowan, are hanging out in this like gazebo, and Ghostface is kind of trundling through the bushes behind them.
Yeah.
And then there's a part where they're at a grocery store and his face is like reflected in the fucking milk section, and those are really stupid scenes.
Oh no, for real. The film has decided very bizarrely that it wants a running time of almost 2 hours, which was not a requirement of a horror film in 1996. This movie could have come in at 85 and no one would have blinked. And that results in a lot of padding in the middle. Like a lot of padding. I always think that the scene at the party where Randy lays out the rules comes relatively early in the film. It's deep into the second half.
Oh, for sure. I have less of a problem with the middle parts of the film. And look, I'm very strict on runtimes. Like my perfect runtime is 78 minutes. But I think that the Scream films, with the kind of extended third act post-reveal scene that they have, plus the opening scene, like to me, like earn that extra time a little bit because they are doing things that I like with it.
That's fair.
But yeah, there is a bit of a stretch in the middle.
Sure. Well, I will give you my third positive, and I'm not counting the deaths that work here because that's I think a different category. But there's a scene where they're in a video store. Mm-hmm. I believe, is it Randy's the character who works in a video store?
Yes, of course.
So, well, yeah.
So I'm just saying.
They're talking about how, who's the killer, what's going on, and Randy's sort of already very clearly talking about what's going on in their lives using the logic of a narrative analysis. And he is yelling at, is it Stu that he's talking to in the scene?
Yeah, because they're watching Billy like lurking in the horror section, and he doesn't join the scene until later. That's
right. And he, at one point, when Stu like raises the question, why would Billy want to kill his girlfriend? Randy says very loudly, "There's always a reason to kill your girlfriend."
Oh yeah.
And the camera's pointing at him, and it's a shallow focus. And behind him, we see a woman perusing the shelves, and she's out of focus, so she's just kind of a blurry shape. But when he says that, she looks up and very clearly like has a ew look on her face. And then when it cuts back to him, she's like kind of listening to their conversation and eventually rolls her eyes and walks away. It's the only joke Wes Craven ever staged that I think is funny.
Wow. So, A+, rating it on your Wes Craven scale. Pretty good.
Exactly. Because as we talked when we did People Under the Stairs last month, not earlier this month, but last month,
mm-hmm.
I don't jibe with Wes Craven's sense of humor. But in that case, I liked it. It was a good joke. It was understated. Being out of focus really sold it. If it had like racked to her face, it would have ruined the joke. But it's because it's just there. It's there if you want to see it. But it's not being insisted upon.
That is a very good joke, and I will trade you the film's two worst jokes. Wes Craven as Fred the janitor, terrible cameo.
That's an example of a like, we're going to just stop the movie cold for this cutaway. It does nothing, but it's an in-joke. Haha, I hate that moment.
Yeah, no, it's very, very bad. But then also the thing that I like, the meta joke that I like the least is Tatum has a line where she's like, it's almost like a Wes Carpenter movie or something. And I'm like, these characters know everything there is to know about horror films. Why is she fucking this up? It just makes no. It's totally unmotivated, and I don't understand why it's a joke.
Such a strange moment, and it's such a like emphasized joke. I remember the first time I saw it for like a hot minute, I literally thought, is the joke that because Wes Craven's directing this movie, there is not a director named Wes Craven in this universe, and Wes Carpenter is the name of the director of Nightmare on Elm Street in this universe. And then I realized that was fucking stupid and moved away from it. But yeah, that is a very clumsy bit.
Yeah, well, and it's also a bit that invites you to think about, okay, wait, what the fuck is going on? Which is not that's not useful for anything.
Yep.
But okay, so I ultimately find that I wouldn't say that Scream is a laugh riot. It's barely a comedy to me. Like, it's certainly a satire, but it's not like a quote unquote funny movie. I just think it's the humor makes it there's like a brightness rather than a slap your knee kind of hilarity to it.
Oh, I think that's real. I think certainly critics in '96 talked about it like it was a slap your knee style comedy, which it's not. It's got more than its share of comic relief, I would say, but it's certainly not like a laugh riot.
Yeah, it's got its share of comic relief, but most movies do. Like I do think that Scream is functioning largely as a horror film and as a whodunit, and I would say functioning extremely well. And as a comedy, that's kind of something it glances at, but is never fully interested in actually becoming.
That's fair. I think that to me there's a bit more comedy than I think you are seeing in it, which for me is a lot because of some of the performances. I think that in particular Jamie Kennedy and Matthew Lillard are playing their characters at a fundamentally comic pitch. So basically anytime they wander on screen, it feels like the movie's sort of looking into becoming a comedy. It never commits to it.
That's a good point. Because I guess I'm thinking about the jokes in terms of especially the meta humor and that kind of thing. But like, I really like Matt Lillard's performance in this movie. It's so extra and wild.
We found our first specific point of disagreement.
Okay. I would say he could have toned it down in earlier scenes probably, but I think that it does not get better than like Mom and Dad are gonna get so mad at me, like in the final like killer reveal as he's dying and bleeding out onto a phone.
I think his performance finds its shape after the killer reveal, and part of me wonders, was it foreshadowing and Lillard's just not good enough to control that, or what exactly is going on there? I think once he reveals himself to be one of the two killers, everything he's doing, at least I can like make sense of it. I find him nails on a chalkboard irritating before that moment.
Oh, yeah, I don't see how you couldn't. Like, he's just one of those guys where you're like, oh, I guess he sucks. Okay. But yeah, the killer performance makes it all worth it for me. Like, that's such a great kind of gonzo nonsense approach.
No, like I like that part of it, and I will contrast that with Skeet Ulrich, who I don't think ever does anything in this movie.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I had a list. I was looking at all of the performers in the movie because there are some people who I think are like perfectly capable. I don't find anyone to like. I don't personally think anyone like actively is bad in this movie. I think Jamie Kennedy doesn't fully embarrass himself as he would later. But like, yeah, Skeet Ulrich and Nev Campbell are the ones who are doing the least for me.
I'd say multiple people pass into actively bad for me, and in the case of Neve Campbell, it harms the movie actively that she does so.
Okay, so wait, so who else would you put on that list for you?
Ulrich, for sure. I find David Arquette to be really, really. Actually, he's probably a third character who, when he comes on screen, it feels like the movie just is sort of like vibing into comedy in a way that I don't like. I think that his performance is too aw shucks and like cute in a way that I find very irritating.
Okay. See, I love David Arquette's performance in this as this character. For that same reason.
I think if you love this movie, you have to, and I don't, so I don't.
No, that's totally fair. No, but you're right. Now that I feel like I'm trying to backtrack a little bit on my comments about the comedy. Like, there's a lot of character comedy in here that is just kind of breezy and kind of just flowing and not exactly like throwing itself in your face, but like a lot of his sweet moments I really enjoy. Like when he's walking away with Gale Weathers and saying like, "Oh, do you know the name of that constellation?" She's like, "No." He's like, "No, neither do I. I was just asking." I like that. Anyway, so you don't like David Arquette?
Right. Don't like David Arquette. There's plenty of people that I neither like nor dislike. I mean, I neither like nor dislike Courtney Cox, Rose McGowan. I feel like Henry Winkler is doing what Craven was directing him to do, and it's a real shame that Craven was directing him to do that, but I don't blame the performance for that.
Okay,
I don't like that character. I don't think that character was well conceived at all.
I completely agree with you there. But he's just in so little of the movie. But yeah, him whipping those scissors around, it's a big choice that I don't understand.
And a big part of it, I think, is taking sort of famously one of the most likable, nice guys who's just a positive grounding present on set. Like everyone in Hollywood talks about how Henry Winkler's just such a mensch. And then you bring him on and you have him like cursing and threatening students and being this kind of vulgar, violent asshole. And that's another part of the meta humor. It's a different part of meta humor, and it's one that in principle I'm less opposed to. But it just feels very big in ways that I don't think came off.
Yeah, because I wouldn't say like I get that would be the point of that character, but I don't get any sort of like actual like grounded menace or like meanness from that role. It's just does not come off.
Yeah, no, it feels like I don't know. I don't get what's going on with that character.
Yeah, like a role that does that for him. He was just in Barry on HBO, where he plays this kind of venal, self-obsessed asshole, and he's much better. Like he can pull off that role. He's just not doing it in Scream.
All right, and I'd say it's not doing the same thing at all. But in terms of him just playing a sort of unlikable prick, I mean, we've got his performance in Arrested Development, where I think he's sort of like just an arrogant lawyer jackass who he does it very well. But I think fundamentally, I think it's a directing problem. I really do. I maybe it's just because I don't want to say shit about Henry Winkler because he is apparently such a nice guy. But it feels like he's giving the film what the film wanted him to give, and I just don't like that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That look, I will give you that because that is a character I have absolutely no passion for. It's just not really functional. And I think ultimately, when because movies are such a subjective medium, basically for me these are the things that I can sweat off, and for you, you're building like a Lego tower of hate out of all these little things.
No, I mean, that's fair. I do want a lot of these are sort of not nitpicks because I think they're bigger than nitpicks, but they're in the spirit of, as you said, like little things that I'm building a tower out of. I do think one thing I just glanced over it, but it to me is an actual flat out problem with the film.
Okay.
Neve Campbell. So the film, it's trying to do a thing that slasher movies don't, and I think this is part of where Williamson is trying to be more sophisticated than the genre. It's giving us a character arc for its protagonist. Like, she is a psychologically well worked out figure. Mm-hmm. And I think we can discuss whether or not that arc works, and there's some specific things about it I just don't think were smart writing, but let's spot the movie. She comes in with this basket full of trauma, and she feels guilt, she feels loss, she feels isolated from her peers, and the movie's arc is sort of her coming to grips with what happened to her a year ago. And I think obviously the final girl in any slasher movie has more going on, but it's typically like you get one character trait. Your character trait is that you're good with kids. Your character trait is that you're a tomboy, whatever. As opposed to the no character traits that other characters get in a slasher film. So they're not like psychologically complex roles. I think to a certain extent, Sydney is. I think she is kind of a complex role. And I find Neve Campbell's performance to just be very one note the whole way. It's just she's sad. Like that's what she's doing. She's playing sad. And I think that it lets down what the film is trying to do in terms of bringing a sort of more psychologically realist grounding to the genre. I just don't think she's there. I don't think she brings what the movie needs her to bring.
I don't disagree. I don't think it's as big of a film damaging problem. I mean, I think that, yeah, I mean, there are many Scream fans who are also like diehard Sidney Prescott fans, and I'm not among them. Like she's not a final girl that appeals to me, except for she does tend to come alive in the like post reveal sequences where she gets to kind of get a little more like Linda Hamilton badass briefly, but the moments of emotion, you're right, there's no nuance to it.
I also, something that occurred to me, and I don't think it's the first time it occurred to me, but it just landed on me when we both said her name out loud. One of the biggest rules is that the final girl has an androgynous name, and they don't talk about that. And how dare they not talk about that?
Yeah, no, it like they really aren't actually that interested in digging into like the actual meat of what a slasher movie does. They kind of left that to Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon to like actually talk about things. Which
certainly I would be content to go on a little rant about how I think Behind the Mask is for me what Scream is for other people. But that's getting us afield of this movie.
Yeah, that is getting us afield. We're talking long enough about Scream. We shouldn't divert too much. But yes, Behind the Mask is a very, very good movie. And my biggest qualm with it is that they do not use the term final girl. Don't they say like survivor girl or something?
I don't remember. Yeah. Survivor girl sounds right. It's a big problem. It's like a weirdly, because the whole movie is so obviously Carol Clover, the motion picture, and then they don't use the term final girl, and it's just, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, so that's infuriating. But otherwise, very, very good movie. Moving back to Scream. Okay, so beyond the first scene, is there anything in Scream that you do find effectively scary or like, horror?
Oh, I mean, Tatum's death is an old-timer. Like that is one of the best kills of the 1990s.
Yes, her just neck snapping in the cat door in the garage. Yeah, that is incredible. I think that the lead up to that moment is also pretty solid, because one of the things that I like about Ghostface as a killer is how eminently fallible he is. Because she like hits him in the crotch with a beer bottle and like slams him in the face with the top, like the freezer door of the refrigerator, and he does go down because he is a stupid teenager ultimately. Like, and that is the reveal. Like as much as he is an accomplished killer who gets what he wants most of the time, like he takes a lot of damage, and that's something you don't see in a lot of slashers.
No, that's very true. I completely agree with that. It wouldn't necessarily leap out to me as something that I would think about if you hadn't called it to my attention, but I fully agree. Like, and I think in general, yes, the Tatum sequence is where it's probably working best as a pure slasher film for me, both because it ends in a really just terrifically staged death scene, but also because it is for real trying to ramp up the tension, which I don't know if I think in general I feel that the movie is succeeding, certainly, or even necessarily trying to be a suspense piece, which lots of slashers aren't. They're just, sort of parading people in front of the camera to get butchered. So
that's a good point. Yeah, and I ultimately I think a lot of the chase sequences that they do pepper throughout, like even if the suspense isn't necessarily being built throughout the entire film, like their scenes of suspense are generally more effective, because I am someone who can get very bored very quickly in a chase sequence, but I think that these ones generally have an appeal to them that most don't for me. Like even like Sydney's chase sequence in the house, she has that gimmick where she opens her closet door to kind of jam her bedroom door closed, and they're playing with things that I think are interesting.
Okay, that's cool.
And even though it's a stupid gag, I do always jump a little bit at the gag where Sydney's running away from the killer on the staircase and opens her front door, and Dewey is there holding up the mask.
Oh, sure.
It is so psychologically unmotivated in any sort of... It doesn't make sense why he'd be doing this, but it is still very scary in the moment.
Yeah, that's fair. I confess that moment sort of didn't even leave a path on my brain as it marched through. But
That's
I'm glad
fair.
that you love it.
I always jump at it.
That's fair.
My phone background is actually an art piece that is that scene, but with Dewey as a pinup model.
Okay, I don't know if I want to see this or specifically don't want to see this. Okay, there we go.
Oh, here, I'll send it to you, actually. I mean, I like it because it's silly, but I like it because it's extremely silly. But anyway, that's beyond the pale. That's beyond the point.
But yeah. So tell me some of the other. I mean, we've kind of given me airtime to talk about what bothers me. So what are some of the things that you think are like specifically, not just strengths, but like what are the defining strengths of this movie for you?
Okay, well, part of the defining strength of the movie, I mean, I really do like the general aesthetic of what a Scream movie is doing, even though it gave rise to the a set of slashers that I personally don't have a lot of time for. I like that I think that the reason that a whole subgenre was birthed from Scream is because of all the decisions that they're making to make it a more robust kind of film experience, like more expensive, more everything. Like I love, like there's something about the way that Marco Beltrami's like score mixes with like the crane shot of a school or a building or whatever that is so like archetypically Scream to me. I think it does have a very pronounced sense of what it's trying to accomplish visually. And sonically, I think Marco Beltrami's score is excellent. And that's not something anyone's ever said about any Marco Beltrami score. But I
think the Academy said it about at least one Marco Beltrami score, sadly.
My goodness. I mean, but very much like Harry Manfredini, who just pulled it out of his ass like a full masterpiece for Friday the 13th, and then just kept doing that over and over again to less effect later on.
Yep.
I think Marco Beltrami's score for Scream is an incredibly solid work. He's pulling in these like kind of Western themes. Sydney's main theme is this melancholic lament that never really does anything with. But I think that it's very unusual for a horror score in that it has these textures that are very unusual and lots of very heavy drums that I like, and this kind of like distorted guitar sound, like the kind of, I mean, it's kind of birthed from Nick Cave's Red Right Hand, which is a song that's used in all the Scream movies too. Mm-hmm. But I think there's this kind of not grungy, but like edgy, dark sound to it that's like really big and bombastic that I really like, and I think that ties in with the visuals in the sense of kind of expanding the scope of a slasher into something like bigger and more just in your face.
Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah, I just like the look and feel of a Scream movie from the 90s.
That's cool.
It's something that I like to be awash in.
I appreciate that. I think that's a very interesting perspective that I hadn't necessarily heard before. So I thank you for saying that. I would be lying if I said that I necessarily agreed, but it is a compelling perspective to me.
Thank you. And it's totally tied in with nostalgia, of course.
Sure.
I mean, not for me nostalgia for this time period because I was 2 when Scream came out. But it's nostalgia for Scream itself, like as the center of the Maleficent-esque briar patch that my love of horror has become.
No, and that's very cool. And I almost wonder for me if it is sort of a specific anti-nostalgia, because I do associate that aesthetic with the 90s, which, I mean, in retrospect, God, wish we still had movie making like we had in the 90s. But at the time, it all felt very, very hollowed out to me. There's something about it's not quite the like digital sheen of the 2000s, but a lot of these movies feel very clean to me in a way. And I'm not even just saying Scream. I'm saying just cinema in general in the 90s feels a little too clean to me. Although I will say the Scream films do, to a certain extent to me, feel polished. They're not big budget films. I mean, this isn't like a tent pole, but I do like the kind of hard scrabble we were able to get some, dog ends of footage vibe that you get from a lot of 80s slasher films. They feel like sort of corrupt objects in a way that Scream still does feel like a studio production to me.
Yes. Okay. I agree with that. I like Scream for different reasons than I like the grubby slashers of the 80s, because I don't think it is necessarily evoking them in any like actual meaningful way, like aesthetically or plot wise. Like it is a pretty toothless movie when it comes to gore or sex.
There's actually a specific moment that really, really stuck in my craw, and I don't want to be the guy who's like, why weren't there tits in this movie? But there's a moment where the people downstairs are watching the movie, and one of the actors, it's Halloween, and there's about to be the topless shot in Halloween, and they all like start to lean up for it, and at the exact moment that it's going to show the actress taking off her top, it cuts to Neve Campbell pulling off her own top in her sex scene with Billy. And she's of course still wearing a bra, because that's one of the things in 90s horror is these more or less A-list actresses, or at least B-list actresses, aren't going to do nude scenes. And it's not that I want Neve Campbell to be parading around topless. I don't really care one way or the other. It's a moment where the film seems to really be aggressively pointing out that it's not an exploitation film.
Yeah, it's pointing at the fact that it's pulling its punches.
Exactly. And I find that disagreeable. I don't know why. Again, it's not like I go to movie. I have porn if I need to see boobs, but like in this particular case,
it's more about the way in which they promise it and deny it. It feels like like you're not gonna, like it's judgmental,
right? And that ties in for my vibe with the whole movie, which you've clearly said is not the vibe you get. The movie to me feels like it's coming from a place of smugness towards the genre. And that's maybe the moment where it becomes the most right in your face.
Yeah, that moment I can't defend. I do think that's a problem as well. But I just I am drawn to these characters generally, and I am drawn to the kind of aesthetic universe that they're in. But I am drawn to it in a completely separate way from how I'm drawn to other slasher films.
That's interesting to me. That gives me, I think, some clarity on how one finds a way into this film, because I think certainly one of the reasons I bounce off of this film is that I'm trying to watch it using the same toolkit that I used to watch an 80s slasher film.
Yeah, that's just not really possible. It doesn't make sense to me to do that, because it does, like, that is a place where it fails most singularly. But where I think it doesn't fail is that, I mean, it also fits in to me with, I mean, I am a Wes Craven scholar. I have what?
And as we have recently laid out, I am the opposite of that.
Yes. So. And that is okay. But for me, and this is something I know you can relate to, even if you don't agree with it in this particular context, I embrace the kind of messiness of Wes Craven, and I think that it's much more interesting to me personally than a kind of calculated, objectively more technically well done work like most of the works of John Carpenter. Like, I like John Carpenter movies a lot of the time, but I find him as a directorial presence very chilly. And kind of impenetrable. But my favorite directors tend to be a little messy and a little overstuffed and a little overeager and kind of spilling out their kind of internal thoughts and feelings and flaws too into their movies. Like I think that's what I really like about Wes Craven. That's my favorite filmmaker is Pedro Almodovar, who is like an unparalleled esthetician, but also his plots are so dense and melodramatic and sometimes don't really conclude in a way that makes any sense, but just like the passion and eagerness that he's stuffing the things that he loves into a movie, that's something that I respond to. And I think Wes Craven does that a lot. Obviously the strongest authorial voice in Scream is Kevin Williamson. But I think one of the reasons that Wes Craven agreed to do this script is because it speaks to a lot of the things that he really does like to do in his work. He does like to expose the skeletons in the closet of, the supposedly perfect suburban lifestyle. He does love to, the sins of the parents falling on the heads of the kids. So basically this thing that Sydney's mom has done has fermented and become this horrible, grotesque thing that has killed a lot of teenagers a year later. And I think that that's something that appealed to Wes Craven. And actually, you know what? Let me rephrase that, because thinking about where the Scream movies go, it is not Sydney's mom's fault. It's just like all the parents being despicable to each other. Like
Sure.
Sydney's mom is cheating on her dad with Billy's dad, but Billy's mom left because of that and never spoke to her son again. And so everyone's making bad decisions, and all of that has bled through to their children. But ultimately, I think that is a kind of subtext that Craven has been chewing on since his very first film, The Last House on the Left, which you do not like. But that kind of it ties in with this kind of broader perspective on him that I do enjoy.
I can see that. That's interesting to me. I know we've been talking about this movie for ages, and I hesitate to introduce another line of discussion, but I do want to bring it up since you just mentioned how much of the film is sort of the ghost of Maureen Prescott sort of living into the present, resulting in all these dead kids. I am bothered by how this film villainizes Maureen Prescott.
Yes, that's actually a big problem, and that's why I was trying to step back, because I totally misspoke in even pointing at her as the villain or anything.
It's like, remember how Sydney's mom's a slut? I think that's a good thing that the movie does. No, I get it. No, I find this to be weirdly puritanical about that.
Yes, but also that's what slasher movies do. Like, that is actually tying in with the slashers of the 80s rather well.
No, I mean, that is true, but at the same time, I think that it's the same thing as, like, I'm okay with a character who has, like, one badly expressed character trait in a way that the more it feels like the film is trying to do something sophisticated, the more I think it calls attention to where it's falling short of that.
No, that is totally fair. Yeah. No, I hear that.
And then the other thing you mentioned, this is really as much a Kevin Williamson film as a Wes Craven film. Cravenson.
Huh.
And I agree with that fully. And to me, that is not a good thing to be. I find Kevin Williamson's voice as a writer very hollow.
Yeah, no, I understand that you feel that way. I do like Kevin. Well, we can't. This isn't working. I do like Kevin Williamson. I think that he writes teenage characters who are exactly as smart as real teenagers think they are. And I do enjoy that kind of heightened reality of his work. But to each their own.
Yes, Shakunson cinema.
Exactly. And the last thing that I'd like to throw out is I do enjoy the 90s touches of, like, son, why do you have a cellular telephone? And that is something that I like. And I think there's this kind of annoying theme in a lot of criticism that a movie should strive to be timeless and not make, like, contemporary references or technology that will age it quickly. I think that is a foolish thing to hold up as, like, a goal for movies to have. And I like it when a movie's a time capsule. I like to be able to step back in time and see how things were going over there.
I mean, I obviously feel individually attacked by your belief that is a flaw in criticism, but I certainly, it is a time capsule and it's a fun one.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm criticizing some of your reviews, and that's fine. Everyone has an opinion.
Exactly. And no, because I actually, I specifically believe that being timeless is a thing movies should strive for, and it's bad if they don't. But, to each their own cinema.
Yeah. But also, I mean, wouldn't you agree that, a big part of, rewatching the Friday the 13th movies is seeing how the history of the 80s affects...
Oh, of course.
Every step of those films.
Oh, I'm speaking at a bigger this is the Friday the 13th movies aren't good, and they would not be mistaken for good.
Of course.
I'm talking about what makes a 4-star movie a 5-star movie.
Okay. See, I just
to me.
I just no, of course that's how any star rating on any movie works. It is only to you.
Yes.
But yeah, I do disagree on that. I think that timelessness is not something that I value in a film. If films are that and they're good, then they're good, and if films aren't that and they're good, then they're also good. I don't really, either way. I'm loving.
That's fair.
Do you have anything else you want to throw out? Last final thoughts?
No, I mean, I think I covered all of the things that I wanted to complain about. It's just not a movie that I vibe with at all, but you've certainly given me some good reasons why you do, and I respect that.
I think that wasn't even something that I thought I would be able to do, but I'm glad that I did, because I do think that there's Scream to me is just this kind of foundational text that does obviously mean a lot to me, but I don't think it's perfect, and I don't think it has to be perfect to mean as much to me as it does.
Sure.
So yeah, it is a movie that I love to revisit, but it is okay that you've only seen it twice in your life. That's probably enough for anyone.
And most likely, yeah, I don't foresee a third, to be honest.
I mean, in 30 years, when they're making Scream 2050, you'll probably do a new.
I will say I am planning on rewatching the franchise in preparation for also Scream, which is a very frustrating title. But yes.
Jesus Christ. Can't get into that. But yeah, but hey, this was just your first step on that journey to get ready for Scream 2022.
Just out of curiosity, what's your ranking of the Scream films, the 4 that exist?
Ooh, probably Scream 2, Scream 4, Scream 3.
Cool. I think I'm probably 2, 1, 4, 3, but I will need to rewatch 2, and we'll be doing so very soon.
Exactly. I can't wait for that.
Yep.
But yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. I haven't looked at how long we've been talking, but it feels like it's been long. 8 hours. But yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Next month, we're starting a whole new year. And we're actually going to be doing a topic that I'm very excited about and hoping to make an annual thing. Because we have now done our first full calendar year of Bride of Alternate Ending. So I want to take the new year as a chance to look back and reflect, and we're going to nominate 5 movies for a Patreon poll that are either follow-ups or remakes or spiritual successors to movies that we've previously covered on the podcast. I don't have the list in front of me, but for example, there is a new remake of The Slumber Party Massacre that came out, and we previously covered Slumber Party Massacre 2, so that may be on there. And the thing that, spoiler alert, that I'm going to vote for, another entry on that list is the Fox remake of the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
What I'm going to be voting for. We should not put our thumbs on that scale, but yes.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, so if you're on the Patreon, you can vote for that. But yeah, that's what we're going to be doing for both episodes of January, and I'm very excited for that. And hoping to make it an annual tradition if we watch enough movies that provide fodder for that.
We're watching horror films. I think we can rest assured we will be watching movies that generated or were sequels.
Yep, that's a great point. But yeah, until then, thanks so much for listening. Share your thoughts on Scream in the comments, I guess. I will read them. I will read all of your comments. But yes, until next time, thank you so much for listening. Goodbye, everybody.